All right. So here we are. My name is Alisé Préjéan, and I'm with KameliaSimeonova. I always love saying your name.
It takes
And
time, right?
what?
It takes time.
It does. It's like the way it flows. It's
Very
Kamelia
long one.
Simeonova. I just love it. So I've said it a lot in my lives to actually share with this with people that we're going to get together. And I always, if you ever watch them, you can, and because you know me, you can watch how I say it because it just like puts me in this essence, you
Yeah,
know?
you get a personal touch.
Yes, exactly. I just love saying your name. So I say it a lot, actually. I said it a lot with actually doing the lives on this about this particular recording that we're doing.
Thank you.
But anyways, so yeah, so we've gotten together before, and I don't remember if in the last time that we did this video, I think it was for the Scorpio. Did we do the Scorpio new moon eclipse?
So yeah, yeah.
Okay, because that was the last eclipse season in 2022, and I might have introduced you, and I don't know if you want to talk about anything about um, what you offer, or what you do, or what your background is, but um, it's something that we can address here before we get started if we want to.
Okay, I'm evolutionary astrologer, and I came to astrology from psychology because I needed more answers, and I've been exploring different types of astrology, and finally I found the one that really resonates. And of course, we both have training in deep memory process, which is a type of regression training, regression work, which goes really nicely with that particular way of looking in astrology. Generally, it could be considered evolutionary astrology, but that's a very broad a term. So we're not going to stick to a particular school of evolutionary astrology. We're just going to say that evolutionary astrology, putting that evolutionary in front of astrology, just meaning that we're looking at our astrological charts, our astrological lives from the perspective of the past, not necessarily the past in this life, but from other lives too, and then how this goes together into looking in our evolutionary goal in this life and all that. So that's what I do. I do past life regressions and also astrology readings, and my website is talesoftheheart.net.
Yay.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Tales of the Heart. I love that name.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, so if you're watching the recording, just to share with you that Camelia and I have known each other since regression therapy training, actually. So we met at regression therapy training. We studied with Patricia Walsh, and we both also studied with Kimmery Weimer of evolutionaryastrology.net. And then Camelia also went on to study with Michael DeBaker. And I'm not sure what he calls his school. Maybe is it School of Evolutionary Astrology?
Online School of Evolutionary Astrology, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So both of our foundations are evolutionary astrology, but of course, with any kind of healing or therapeutic practice, I mean, it just grows and grows. And, both of us have a lot of different um, astrological techniques I think we're both open to and study. So that's the background. And today we're going to be talking about the new moon solar eclipse in Aries. It's going to be at 29 degrees and 50 minutes of Aries. And this is happening on April 19th / 20th, 2023, wherever you are in the world. And so I think that one of the things I loved about our last talk, Camelia, is that because we were talking about Taurus and Scorpio, we talked about, those archetypal, that archetypal consciousness that we all have. What is Taurus? What is Scorpio? And it's super important to understand that when we're talking about eclipses in specific signs. And so I was thinking that it would be great to talk about Aries and Libra and what that really means in the psychological development
Right.
first, and then we can talk about the charts,
Mhm.
the chart of this new moon solar eclipse.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So do you want to get started, or
Um,
do you want me to? And then however we want to do this.
well, you can start this time, and then I'll, follow.
Okay. So one of the things I love about Aries is that Aries is the archetypal consciousness that has to do with our personal identity. So this is why it's often correlated to I am. And this is where we've emerged out of this cosmic consciousness. I think of Pisces as the cosmic womb, where it's this universal womb that we're all a part of, or in other words, this everything that exists, we're all a part of that. And so we merge out of this ocean of consciousness into a individual particle of that consciousness, and or an individual drop of that ocean of consciousness, right? And so we have our own specific expression that has to do with our own evolutionary momentum, our own evolutionary purpose. And Aries is where, we, as I said, we emerge out of this ocean of consciousness, and we actually um oh, I just want to keep saying emerge. We come out into our own personal um um evolution. uh and this cycle of Aries through Pisces is something that we continuously do, right? So we know that when the sun is in Aries, there's this new cycle that begins. And this is the thing, is then, as we seed a new cycle, it has its own evolution of going from seed and growing into flowering and fruitioning, and then going back into this ocean of consciousness to re-emerge again. And so that's why Pisces can be kind of this dissolving of what has been into emerging into something new. And so Aries is that. Now Aries is ruled or guided by Mars. And so Mars is how we take action on behalf of that which we are seeding in consciousness. And so Aries is very much about seeding consciousness, or seeding a new beginning and initiating something new. And Mars is how we act on behalf of that. And because it's new, this is where Mars and Aries can be this correlated to 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We take 2 steps forward, and we're actually acting with instinct. And Aries is very much about our instinctual nature, this instinct. And then we kind of take a step back, and we actually receive back from the environment and from consciousness this reflection of how we're actually taking action on behalf of what it is that we're seeding. So Aries, Aries, then this is how it correlates and is very much related to Libra, the opposite sign of Aries. And this is ruled by Venus, or the planetary guide is Venus. And so our Mars nature and our Venus nature very much is related in. And so I always think of them as the creative lovers, the internal creative lovers, right? Within us, we all have this masculine and feminine side to us. And so we do take those 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I always think of that as like, okay, now we're going to receive and see, are there ways that we need to actually adjust how we're actually acting on behalf of what it is that we desire to move toward in consciousness. So What do you think, Camelia? I think at this point, I just kind of want to see if you have anything to say about just that piece, because really, even that, there's a lot of information just right there. There's so much right there. And I know that we could actually go even deeper into just getting that specific surface of information out.
Yeah, and I think we should, because the deeper we go, the more understanding people will have for the archetype of the sign. Because once the archetype is understood in depth, they don't need to memorize in the book what exactly Aries means. It's going to come to that naturally as understanding. And so it's great that you covered the fact that Aries is related to Libra, because it is. There is always two parts of a particular theme, and that theme about initiation has to do also with the way how this initiation is shared with others, or it's reflected by others, which is the Libra. And so, as you said, we are emerging from this collective consciousness where everyone is accepted, everything is there, everything is allowed and all that. But at the same time, so we have this collective thing, and we feel the collectiveness, we feel that we're part of all this. And in order for a new spur of creation to happen, that requires so much energy, because first of all, the feeling of this coziness of being part of everything is there, and there is a romantic side to it. There is this Piscean consciousness that is, yeah, I'm part of all this. And so in order for this spur of spark of energy to come and actually start individuating and gaining its own personal experience, there has to be that huge amount of energy. And of course, you said we're associating Mars, planet Mars, with that, because we're initiating action through Mars. And so it takes a lot of courage for that new beginning. And it also, what it takes is, if we think in our lives about beginning of something that we haven't done before, we can find out that the more we think about how we're going to start, the more we feel scared, or we have all these thoughts about, oh, it may not happen, or how is this going to happen. It looks like it's a huge endeavor. So one of the ideas of Aries is also the instinctual action. So there is no forethought, because the more we start thinking again, it pulls us back. So one of the characteristics of Aries, of course, is this instinctual action. There is no forethought. I mean, there's no thought before. And that's necessary. We have to understand that this is very necessary, because we all are aware of some negative sides of Aries, and those are, okay, I'm going to do something that I want, and I don't care about the others and what they think. And sometimes I may be a little bit more out in their face, but we have to understand that that's a necessity, just because it takes a lot of courage, and it takes crazy, just spur of the moment in order for us to go through this, I mean, pull away from this collective consciousness or subconscious or whatever. And so we have that. I mean, if we look at the glyph of Aries, it looks like this, either a little sprout that's pulling from the seed in the ground, and then it can look also like a fountain, like, so this spur. So the idea of instinct, and the spur light or whatever spark of action is there. And so of course, the idea is that that's needed. But in Libra, we also eventually we have to figure out how to do it with consideration of others. And so, but there is of course, always that this mirroring part is there to calibrate the right expression of this consciousness, because we know if Aries doesn't consider others, then it's going to be, it's going to hinder their own evolution. But then what happens if they start considering others too much? Then they're losing their own identity. So there has to be a freedom for Aries to explore, because they're coming from the collective unconscious. They don't know who they are. And they're not going to understand who they are by thinking of who they may be or constantly comparing themselves to others. They have to explore. And so we also have the idea of Mars, and we can later touch on of what happens when this action is not able to fulfill itself, because the action is also different types of actions are also the fight or flight reaction, or the freeze, and then the pure action. So we have all those things that we have to consider when we're talking about Aries, and what happens with that energy when it's not able to express itself.
Yeah, which is going to be really important to talk about.
Yeah.
When you were talking, I was thinking about how, I mean, I could almost feel it, where it's like when you're in the collective consciousness, you know, connected to everything that exists, connected to source, you know, and you think about, I mean, when we're born, this is an Aries energy. And even in our natal charts, the sign that was on the horizon when we were born is the beginning of the first house. By the way, Aries is considered the first house in the natural wheel of consciousness. And so it is this emerging out of the womb, right? And so recognizing that you're in this place of, you know, what it would be like to be in the womb. It's warm, it's, you have everything you need, and you're fed, and, you know, you're connected, deeply, deeply, subconsciously connected to everything and to source itself. And then, yet, what's interesting is that in that Piscean womb, it's like feeling like when you think about Pisces, and by the way, Pisces is so much related to music, as well as I think artists in general, visionaries, but also actors and actresses. And you can think about like how actors and actresses can be anything, and they come into any kind of a role. And so I think of Pisces in that universal womb as, we know that we are connected, and we actually are and are capable of everything and anything that we can imagine. Pisces is also the imagination. And so it's like when we have that, and yet we decide to incarnate into this dense consciousness in order to actually experience it through this dense consciousness, which is the 3D realm, right? We just naturally emerge with inspiration. And Aries and Mars is very much about inspiration. And so it's not thinking, like you said, it's like, it's just all of a sudden this, it's like this spirit, which is also Pisces, the spirit itself like emerges into becoming something. Just out of pure inspiration, not out of like, I've just like, I'm thinking about it, and it's not like that. It's actually just literally energy that naturally like moves up from the soil, as you were saying, or we could say the universal consciousness. And almost I think of, you know, the pictures of Venus, like she comes out of the ocean of consciousness, right? Those Botticelli Venus art piece. So with that, what's interesting about that, I think, is that we, like you said, it takes courage, because we then must experience this perception of separation. And Mars by action separates, because it selects, it's selective. It is and can be correlated to cutting things. So that's why it is associated with astrology, with even knives and swords and, like things that are just like, it's selecting. It's actually, and we know it's masculine. So it's very much about projecting consciousness outward. And that's a really important piece when talking about Aries too, is it is where we begin to project our consciousness in a specific direction, which is also, equally could be said equally like we're seeding something, because we are when we're projecting our consciousness. And really, as we emerge out of the ocean, we are projecting our consciousness in a specific way. And then, as you said too, we need the reflection of others in order to mirror back to us if it is that we need to make adjustments, or if the reflections is actually giving us a clear picture of what we're projecting is exactly and precisely what it is that we're intending to grow.
Yeah. And the other part also of this is that it's when we're making a choice, whether instinctually, well, it doesn't matter at this point too much of whether there's a forethought, but when we're making a choice instinctually, there's a lot of anxiety in that too, because every time we make a choice, we separate ourselves from all the other possibilities.
Yes.
So that is something that is intrinsic in Aries as well. And and then maybe here is good to add those other two aspects of this cardinal archetype, which are the Capricorn and Cancer, considering that every action we make, whether it's depending on the reaction that we're getting, it always affects our emotional security and how we can go forward for it. And then also we have the judgment part in the Capricorn of whether or not this is considered as right or wrong. And then it brings us back to us as to, can I continue to trust my instinct, or I will have my instinct being influenced by, again, judgment, if there is judgment, or other people, and whether those people like me or not, which will determine whether I'm going to change myself or not change myself. And so that is the reason we call that cardinal archetype, because there is initiation, but as you said, there is 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, because change is not easy, and there is a lot of aspects to change or initiating actions in terms of what the reaction is. And that's how we actually learn how to react and how to act. That's why we have, again, those typical reactions that are also part of the Martian energy, and 3 of them are Martian energy gone wrong, and 1 of them is the normal and the healthy way of acting. So the other 3 are all the 3 Fs: fight, flight, or freeze, which actually blocks our energy. And we're gonna again talk about the possibility and why exactly we have the 29-degree and 50 minutes new moon on a collective level. So what is our history with expressing all that?
Yeah.
And how
Interesting.
yeah.
I was just thinking, interesting too, that Pluto has been in a Capricorn and is now in Aquarius and square the new moon. And I think that that's interesting to me because of Mars's rulership of, or co-rulership of Scorpio, and so Mars and Pluto have a very special relationship. We know that Mars does instinctually act on behalf of Pluto, or the unconscious. And so that's an interesting piece in this new moon chart. But before we get there, because I think that that's going to be a topic of the conversation, of course, as we move further along. But I don't want to skip over some of this, important stuff around this Aries and Mars, and and where, really understanding the Aries and Libra axes of consciousness, because um, when we go into that aspect where we're talking about the courage it takes to make a choice and then to get the reflection back, and in that reflection back with Libra, in the relationships that we have attracted based on how we've projected our consciousness.
Mhm.
This is a really important piece, because this has to do with, and this brings in this aspect of Aries and Libra that is about attraction and repulsion, and how those are actually really important laws that assist us to really see how we are utilizing our Mars and our Aries, how we're projecting our consciousness, and is it actually attracting to us through Libra what it is that we really desire to be acting upon.
Mhm.
And so that also plays into this, what you're talking about with the Cancer Capricorn piece, because this natural square from Aries, Libra to Cancer and Capricorn, the other cardinal signs, this Cancer Capricorn is about emotional security. And this is an interesting piece, and especially in what you said, Camelia, about how, do we maintain the emotional security in our own identity, or do we begin to dismantle our emotional security and our own identity based on the reflections that we get
Yeah,
from the outside world, or what we
our
see as the
integrity.
outside?
Yeah, which
Yeah,
mhm.
exactly. And that internal, like, integrity, are we able to keep in alignment with our personal integrity and personal authority as well? And that's super important with Capricorn and Cancer, I think, because, you know I think that one of the things that is really important, especially for those of us that have Aries placements and Libra placements, is that we are working with, and likely have had experiences where we've actually lost our own integrity or integration of our own identity,
Right.
um, when getting the reflections back. But the thing is, and this is what I love also about the way that in this particular chart of the new moon solar eclipse in Aries, we still have the North Node in Taurus. And so we've had that 18 months cycle with the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio, where this is really getting in alignment with our Venusian, our natural self, our Taurus, our inner side of Venus. Um, and, Mars being the ruler of Aries, and then in the psychological development, then we move into Venus, rulership of Taurus. This is really about, taking action on behalf of our natural, personal, uh, energetic signature, like who we are, in that has emerged from the ocean of consciousness, and who we're designed to be, in regards to our own evolutionary purpose in that emergence of consciousness, right? And so, um, this integrity piece is really important when we're talking about Aries and Libra. Um, but it is also important with this Taurus and Scorpio, but that's where it can actually we can come out of alignment, right? Uh, from if our Venusian, our inner side of Venus, Taurus, isn't solid enough and centered enough within the natural self to recognize that when we get the reflections back from others, Libra, that we have to make that choice around are we maintaining our identity and the integrity of that and the integrity of what we feel is or sense or is what we're inspired to actually create with our Mars energy, or are we losing sight of that? And that attraction repulsion is really important in consideration.
Yeah, it's interesting how it works. We initiate action, we have a reflection from somebody else. Depending on our own makeup, we can take it as a face value, whether that's not, or you have to do it in a different way. So if we integrate that and it really doesn't resonate, but we do it for security reasons, Cancer, then, or our actions are stopped because somebody doesn't like it, then what is it that's going to constitute our own history that we will bring back to Taurus that's going to validate our experience? Nothing. So we cannot come up with our own value system because it's not going to be ours, because we accepted somebody else's value system. So immediately our Taurian part is suffering. And it's interesting that the natural relationship between Libra and Taurus is a quincunx, like we have
Yes.
this. So there is this constant flow between how this instinctual reaction to what we feel inclined to do or to explore and all that meets. Or of course, after we come in this 3D reality for a certain period of time, we accumulate experiences that they're actually conditioning our expectations of what's going to happen when we act. And so there's this piece too, where we come already with the fear of exploration, which immediately affects our value system and who we are. We cannot own who we are because we have the ifs. I cannot do that, or I should probably not go there, or, well, they told me no, so I'm not going to do it. But if you don't do something that naturally comes from you, and you do something else because other people are pleased that way, then it's not, there's no value to your identity. There's value to some alternative identity that you've picked up along the way. And it's interesting because we use that analogy of the seed that's sprouting. There is no, I mean, the seed, you cannot, the sprout always relates to the core of the seed. You're not going to have a pine tree coming from a seed of an oak. So one thing is that the integrity comes from acting from, again, the core of who you are. And then that constitutes a real sense of value, which then could be presented into relationship, into communications, interactions with others that can be sustained. I think maybe we should put the chart on for the eclipse.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's also connects to the part that the North Node is still in Taurus and the South Node is still in Scorpio. And then we have, then again, this call right now to, and we're going to talk about the fact that it's in 29 degree and 50 minutes on top of it, this new moon. But you mentioned that there is a square to Pluto, and then the nodes are in the Pluto Taurus signs right now, and they're actually coming to a very end. So what constitutes 29 degree in a normal movement of planets, the equivalent of 29 degree when we're talking about the nodes movement is actually 1 degree, because their movement is opposite of the one of the planets. So we have this continuation, the ending, the new moon, and in the very end of Aries, combined with the North Node coming to the very end of Taurus, which is that idea of how we're acting on behalf of who we really are. Where is this identity? What happened to it? and then how this relates into locking our own particular value and being integral in terms of who I am, owning that. And that square from Pluto, you jump in whenever you feel like it. That square from Pluto to this moon is exaggerating, in a way, probably not the only thing that it's doing, the fear. And we all come here with a fear. And it's an interesting exploration in terms of this new moon, the idea of fear and where the fear comes from when we're about to act out on our desires.
Well, I think too, the thing is it's a potential of fear. I mean, when you've got the square, the thing about it is it's either your power or fear, the way that I see it anyway.
Right, yes.
Because the pressure with the square with Pluto and the new moon is, when I think of a square, it's really, it's energy that can be utilized as momentum. I mean, it is Aries new moon, so the ruler of the new moon is Mars, which actually creates momentum toward that which we desire to create, because it is the initiator, right? It's how we're taking action. And then Pluto with that square is, well, there's pressure there. And what is the energy? Even when we talk about Pluto too, it's like the unseen, it's in a certain way, it's unconscious, or and we know that Mars acts on behalf of it. So Mars makes it seen. But there's like this welling up of pressure, this Plutonian pressure, which is about power, personal power, right? And it's an Aquarius, and that's new. I mean, it's at 19 minutes of Aquarius. So, it's in that, again, seed point of Aquarius,
Yeah.
which is the Mars and an Aries energy as well. And so I think it does imply that there's something new, that there's pressure to begin to initiate or act upon in regards to one's own identity, especially with, like you said, the nodes coming to completion of its time in Taurus. And, if we haven't been doing the work to really actually stand in our natural identity, our natural self, because we've had lots of energy going on in Aries to help that, as we've been going, in this last few months, particularly, right? If we haven't done that work, then that pressure will bring in and will expose that fear, like you said. It will bring up the fear. And that's what's so beautiful about square from Pluto, is the pressure's there. But if it is that you've been, so where it is we haven't been acting on behalf of whatever is our natural self, our personal values, and how our personal values are just naturally inclined to to have values that are in alignment with our personal evolutionary purpose and momentum.
Right.
And if we've been out of alignment because of relationships, say if we've been out of alignment or not integral with our own identity based on, could be expectations from relationships up to now, could have been upbringing or conditionings from society, could have been lots of things, right? But if we've experienced that fear, and that has on some level wounded the identity, if we haven't been doing the healing of the identity with Chiron being in Aries, then that pressure from Pluto is going to be exposing the fear. And if those fears again, if we've been doing the work, then we're going to experience that as a harnessing of power. Now, there may be pressure because it's new. And like you said, it takes courage to act on behalf of something new, because on a certain level, you're separating yourself from, you know, something that we perceive as was, or some kind of a potential for all kinds of options.
Right.
And then we're actually selecting one, which means that we're saying no to these other things, right? And there's a certain level of insecurity in that because it's unknown.
Mhm.
And that's also something that Pluto brings up is, do you fear something because it's unknown? But one of the beautiful things about it is that, ultimately speaking, as long as we are being absolutely true to our own natural desires, our own natural values, regardless of anything and everything out there, right? Or
Mhm.
as we perceive out there, um, then, all we're ever going to come across is actually who we really are, or who we are. It's only going to be us. I mean, and no matter what we do, even if we act on fear,
Mhm.
it's actually exposing ourselves to ourselves, you know?
Yeah, there's this one piece also that is very unknown to the Aryan consciousness at the beginning, and especially the fear of cutting from that choice, or um, because you're separating yourself from all the other options and all this other, that that separation actually brings your identity more and more to fruition and to definition. And so it's interesting to see, because we sometimes act in order to not lose the environment, or not lose the community or some people that are around us, just because we're used to them and there's this fear of disconnect. But what Aries, through its experience, is actually out to realize is that the more it disconnects, meaning acting on behalf of what's coming from within, from the things that don't naturally, the people or the places or the constructs that we have surrounded ourselves with, in order to for the need of protection, they're going to dissipate, they're going to dissolve, but something that is congruent to that identity will actually replace the people that were there just because of security reasons. And so it's interesting, I mean, for everyone out there, just to look at where exactly that new moon falls in their chart and see, because this is a 29-degree, or maybe that's not the time to talk on the 29-degree, but just the square between Pluto and the new moon is, it's a good thing that it's a square, because if it's not for the squares and those challenging aspects, certain things are not going to be brought into our consciousness. And the more we're unconscious about certain issues that we have within, or certain complexes, or certain things that are actually hindering our potential expression and evolution, the more we continue to act on a like a autopilot. And so the moment those energies are brought to us to figure out that something is not what we didn't do something, or what I did in that area of life, whether this is going to be your own identity, or it's going to be your finances, or it's going to be your friends, group of friends, or intimate relationships, or romantic relationships, or kids, and your own creativity, or home, depending on where this new moon falls in your chart, because of the building energies, and especially that square to Pluto, which is actually simultaneously certain issues coming up to the fore for every one of us, will understand where we act when we didn't act really from the core of who we are, and we behaved in a way that was, let's say, whether it's in a way Libran, so we had to acquiesce, or we had to be somebody else because we were afraid of expressing ourselves, or we were afraid from judgment, or we were afraid from losing ourselves in a way, or we were afraid from some sense of cellular memory of something that had gone wrong. So that's what this square is bringing to our attention, and it could be on a very unconscious level. All of a sudden, a memory comes up. All of a sudden, an old person appears, and we start to, in our consciousness or dreams, or we hear about them, and then we start reminiscing of how that last interaction went, and we realize that we actually didn't act from the core of ourselves. We did something very stupid. So this is where we have this really pressing point to actually realize that that's not the way to go, that we can do it better, that we can do and express ourselves, not somebody else, because of the fear. And the pressing point is also expressed through that 29 degree. As we know, 29 degree is, it's almost like the last moment in which we can grasp this. It's all the exploration up to this point for of the sign of Aries, and we had a lot of action going on in that sign. And of course, we all have this sign in certain area of our chart / our life. And so right now it's almost like recapitulation. Oh, okay, so that's where I didn't act. And we all naturally will feel this pressure to act the right way, to say certain things. Or sometimes we're going to say things or act without, again, forethought, because that energy has been built, and we might find ourselves saying something that, oh my God, that came out of me. But then ultimately we'll figure out that that was me. So, and of course, it's important to reflect on it and see why we weren't us before. What was stopping us? And how we can change that. And actually, again, because we're talking about Aries, there is a possibility that many of us are actually finding ourselves doing or acting without, again, forethought, or without this being as careful as we were before. Because we have to learn something from the experience. We have to learn something from that, allowing ourselves to say something or to act in certain different way, because that is who we are. And that's the whole idea, that we cannot have a value system based on being somebody else. We cannot own that. It's not going to be us, Taurus. It's going to be something else. So I think that, again, the pressure in this case is, it's interesting. I did have this, I don't know if it was revelation or just because I myself have a tendency to suppress the natural flow that comes from within. And I literally had this insight recently that the action towards something that you want is not an effort. It's a release.
That is potent.
It's a release. Because what is the effort is our, thinking or trying to arrange it or to suppress it or to figure out if it's right or not. When we become blind for the fact that, it's coming up, it wants to go.
Yes.
Yeah, whether I'm afraid of, stepping up into, developing my business. I have all these fears of how the people are going to take me, or is it going to be good? Is it not going to be good? Should I talk? Should I not talk? How is this going to be taken? The pure thing is that you have this urge to do it. So where is all this thinking coming from? What is it doing? What is the nature of fear? How is the fear showing up in our life?
Well, this is an interesting point too, because Mercury in the chart is coming pretty darn close to Uranus and
Right.
a Bathymic conjunction, which means we know a completing cycle. And that's so much about the nervous system and communication, perceptions,
Mhm.
connections, and definitions and how we've defined things. You can see that Venus is in Gemini,
Right.
and that's an interesting piece. So we've got a mutual reception where
Mhm.
Mercury, if people don't know what a mutual reception means, it means that you've got planets that are in each other's signs. And so Mercury is in Venus's sign and Venus is in Mercury's sign. So there's a mutual reception there. So there's in this eclipse chart. And so something that's going to be an aspect of our experience of the eclipse can be something around the way that we've defined things
Mhm.
because of relationships. Maybe we've defined things that are really not actually our personal values,
Mhm.
because we've taken on the values of others or the definitions of others or perceptions of others or how others communicated with us. Um, and so it's going to be important to actually come to completion with anything that is out of alignment with
Right.
our personal values, and how we define things is very important. How we perceive things, how we communicate
Right.
about our own you know our own expression and who we really are and our own values. It's very important. And one of the things about Taurus too, it's about embodiment. And I bring up Taurus because of the North Node being in Taurus and
Mhm.
really coming into completion about this
Mhm.
particular aspect of consciousness, which is a yin axis of consciousness, Taurus and Scorpio. This is actually recognizing that our power and the embodiment of our soul comes from within,
Right.
and nothing outside of us can
Exactly.
actually really tell us who we are.
Mhm.
We are the ones that must define things for ourselves. And the thing is that we're going to have different definitions than others, because we're going to perceive uh, reality
Mhm.
based on our own evolutionary purpose. We're all kind of living out our own personal reality, our own personal movie. And so the thing is that means that we're going to have different values. We're going to have different things that we love and different things that we like that other people don't love or don't like. And that's okay. And this is so important with Aries and Libra, is recognizing that, you know, if we find that we've been accommodating for relationships in our lives, other people and their values, or if we get the reflection that how we're defining things, or how we uh, are acting upon what it is that we love, if that isn't resonant, which is a Venusian word, it's a Libra word as well, right? Libra, Taurus, Venus. If it's not resonant with others, and this is something you mentioned already, Kamelia, is that is our cue that we may have come into completion with specific relationships, and investing in relationships that are not resonant with who we are now,
Mhm.
how we define things for ourselves, how we actually define our own personal value by what we value
Mhm.
and how we value.
Mhm.
Because ultimately, we've got to really be completely in alignment with our natural self, and our own personal value is derived from honoring what it is that we love,
Mhm.
and what it is that we value.
Right.
And so, hopefully with this North Node coming to completion of Taurus, that we've really gained the understanding and depth of how important it is to be completely in alignment with our natural selves, allowing relationships to fall away that do not mirror that back to us,
Mhm.
that do not reflect our personal value. And also that, maybe not valuing us, or that isn't valuable. It's not a valuable investment for us to invest, or for others to invest in the connection with us, because it needs to be resonant. And what I love about Taurus is that it is a, not only Taurus, but it's Taurus, Taurus. And I'm sure we touched on this in our last video that we made. It's like, this is our energetic field.
Mhm.
And, I really believe that that energetic field is cultivated through the projection of our own consciousness, how we act on behalf of our own desires, Mars, Aries, and how that literally creates signatures energetically in our Taurus energy, right? And this is how then we magnetize things to us. And is what we're magnetizing to us actually contributing to our personal value? And if it's not, that's where we can actually take a look at, well, that one step back, going, maybe I need to pivot Mars in a new direction, because I need to be completely in alignment with my natural self. And by the way, pivot away from relationships that are not in alignment with my natural self, because those things, that's the repelling that needs to happen. Allowing the people that need to go away, that actually, if, like, say who we are is annoying someone else, well, that's a natural, there's just a natural law there of repulsion that
Mhm.
doesn't actually mean anyone is bad or good, or appealing or not appealing, or it's just that that's this natural repulsion that needs to happen, so that others go to what's resonant for them, that's going to be actually in alignment with their natural selves, so that we can allow in what is in alignment with our natural self. And really, when we look at society, we have been in a very particularly with this Piscean age, we have been very much conditioned to be accommodating, to codependency,
Mhm.
can have come from uh, buying into definitions that source is outside of ourselves, that
Mhm.
we need to actually accommodate something outside of ourselves, that there is separation between us and that which we desire, that there is separation from our own source, and therefore, of course, then there's going to be separation from our own identity.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so the Taurus, Scorpio, and Aries, Libra, uh, those, both of those axes is, and really what's happening now, which is super exciting, is the pressure is there for us to really get alignment with our natural selves, being willing to let go of anyone and everyone, anything and everything that is actually really, in a certain way, you know, this natural repulsion, anything that is not naturally going to be resonant with who we are, letting those things go away, so that what is new can come in. And this is definitely represented with the Pluto square, that NEWMOON as well, in the first degrees of Aquarius, because Aquarius is very much about groups of people, and it
Mhm.
can be like-minded. And so we don't want to be sticking with relationships or groups of people that are no longer resonant with how it is we define things, how it is we think about things. It doesn't mean that, that, oh, we can never be with some, be friends with people, or be in relationship with people that have different ideas. It's just making sure that we have the freedom to have our own ideas. And
Mhm.
Aquarius is very much about freedom, the freedom to be sovereign in your own brilliance and your own ideas. And no matter how different. So we can, definitely be surrounded by people that may have different ideas, which is okay. Just making sure that, we have that freedom to define things for ourselves. And that, there are going to be probably some people that it just naturally falls away because it's not resonant. And, honoring that, so that what wants to come into our lives to actually support us and our natural expression can come in, right?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, this is again exactly correlating to what we said at the beginning. I hope all the thoughts that I have right now I'm going to be able to express clearly. But so the areas and the fear of separation that is unconscious most of the time, because we address areas as somebody that goes and finds what they want, but it's not that. There is also this inherent thing of fear. Why? Because you're disconnected from the consciousness, from the home, from the whatever it was. But but the idea is that the more we go for what we want, the more we define ourselves, it becomes our value system, and then we attract, as you said, from that Taurian field what exactly is ours. The thing is that we get so conditioned into having to participate or be part of groups that have nothing to do with us, because that fear has been really consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally enforced into all of us. And that's how we have found ourselves participating in groups or being part of it. That happens in our, we actually discussed that in our previous conversation, not about eclipses, that from the very beginning in life, we have to fit, because that's our life depends on that. But if we are in a family environment where people have issues with their own identity and healthy expression of identity, then our own identity starts to get repressed. Then we get into the school system, and then the school system refers all the kids as equal because they are exposed to one and the same environment. They're supposed to learn one of the same things. They're supposed to learn them in the same way, and they're graded in the same way. Then we move into the puberty, and the puberty we're supposed to find a rebellion, our individuality, and what everyone is going after it. But then what we have in every society and in every generation, we have the coolness. And so we have to wear certain clothes, we have to wear certain music, listen to certain music, we have to use certain words. There's cool people and not too cool people. So although we're trying to rebel, we're already given the matrix of how we can rebel and how we can be cool. But we forget that this is also a way that's defined. So we found ourselves again, we have to belong in order to be cool. And then we take it from there in society or, man-made religions that are, and so there's progressive loss. Not necessarily 100%. Some people were able to hold to it, but of our own identity. And so there is also that build up fear of what's going to happen if I don't belong, if I don't do what's cool, if I don't say or believe in the things that, and so what is the fear? The fear is you're not going to be accepted. And so because we've replaced the feeling of acceptance, we are accepted, we are important just because we came here on this earth or in this 3D environment to define ourselves in a different way, to create, to follow the spark from the creator. And the creator has never said that this creation or this exploration has to be in a certain way. The 3D reality institutions are telling you that it has to be in this way. And so what we fail to realize is that the more we go for what we want and say no and continue, the more we build ourselves in a way that's going to bring the reality that's going to support who we are. And this is the biggest thing that's been hidden from us, or it just we fail to see it. And so it's interesting in that chart that Pluto is in a trine to this Venus. Well, it's a separating trine, but it's been acting out for a certain amount of time. So And because Pluto, one of the ways we can look at it is as it dipped its little finger in Aquarius. Aquarius has to do with our uniqueness, and
Mm.
so that uniqueness in most cases has been suppressed, traumatized. That's where trauma comes from, and all that, which is all that Aquarius stands for, and many more things. But so in that beautiful relationship to Venus, although maybe not too conscious, we do have the opportunity to connect again. Gemini, that has also to do with connection, right? Because that's how we connect to the world, by naming it, and by having the other person that we try to address respond back to us. So we're getting to had opportunity to connect to that uniqueness and to draw strength and nurturing from connecting with that uniqueness, not from associating with different people that are there just for security purposes. We can't say no to them, or we can't express ourselves, but we have to be there because we've always been there. But what's going to happen if our immediate family doesn't recognize us or doesn't like what we're doing? What's going to happen if our friends all of a sudden have issues with us? So we stay into those artificial relationships for a false sense of security, which potentially denies us our own uniqueness. So this is also something that we will find ourselves in the next, what is it, they say 6 months is what the eclipses are potent for. We will find ourselves more and more connecting to that, and just putting and then realizing again, what is me? Do I have the energy anymore to continue to not be me?
As you were saying, I mean, it's just natural to allow yourself to go towards that which you desire. But it actually takes energy to resist that. And that was something that came across my mind when you're talking about that, is that Mars can be resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And remembering that when we're acting upon anything, we're actually feeding it energy.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
so what do we want to be feeding?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so one of the things that I like about Mars and Venus is just this recognition that Mars, it is acting on behalf of our desire, really coming from Pluto as well, and the unconscious. And that if we come up to something that isn't really uh in alignment with what we desire or what we want, we can decide not to resist that or feed that energy and just pivot into a new direction. And one of the things too that I think about is how when we resist things, we can also be feeding it energy. And so one of the things I've been personally working with is recognizing that when we've set specific realities into motion by our actions, Mars, that we no longer wish to experience anymore because it's not resonant with who we are. There's
Yes.
going to be a certain level of echo from acting on behalf of that identity that we were, even if that identity wasn't who we really are.
Right.
And so when we get that reflection back, it can be, I've been recognizing there's a part of me that resists that. Like, that's not what I want. That's not where I'm going. Or wait a minute, I'm confused because that's reflecting what I was doing before, but I'm making a new choice now.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of resisting that, recognizing that you can utilize the energy to pivot into the new direction and not feed that, or not necessarily resist things that we don't prefer, but just to acknowledge it and move into what it is that we do prefer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Mars is an interesting thing because too, Mars can very much be experienced as irritation or um, anger. And I think when those experiences come into our consciousness, we can recognize that that is energy that's been repressed.
Yes.
And so we've repressed something, maybe unconsciously. We didn't recognize we were repressing it at the time.
Mhm.
But the anger is showing that, the irritation is showing that we've repressed our own consciousness, our natural self.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that's where we can utilize that anger instead of projecting it out there. We can just utilize that energy to actually shift into the new and into initiating new, moving that energy in new ways and recognizing it rather than, kind of projecting it out at someone else, something else with blame is one way. I mean, we know that Aries, being ruled by Mars and Aries and Libra and Cancer, Capricorn, these cardinal signs can very much be projecting blame and shame and guilt
Yeah.
out there.
Mhm.
But, instead of doing that, we can actually utilize and take responsibility, which is the Capricorn theme. So it's taking full responsibility for our own creative nature, Mars and Venus, our
Mhm.
own masculine and feminine, which is our creative nature. And actually, instead of blaming something out there or shaming something out there, pivoting into a new direction that's more resonant with our natural self, Mars and Venus, our natural, creative, instinctual nature. So I think that that is going to be an important piece along with the attraction and repulsion dynamics that we're going to start, that this new moon eclipse really actually begins to initiate
Mhm.
because this is the first eclipse in Aries and because the nodes move into Aries and Libra in July. So then we're going to have, 18 months
Mhm.
of working with that energy and really getting real clear. I mean, and two, the more I want to say more clear about our identity. And the more that we can act on behalf of that and not dissipate the energy by being angry or
Mhm.
irritated at anything out there that we see out there, recognizing that it's a reflection of maybe where we've placed energy in the past,
Right.
but we're choosing with our action to invest in something new.
Mhm.
And so this 6 months, as you were saying, the eclipses can be particularly felt for 6 months. So this next 6 month interval can definitely be as the nodes are wrapping up. This Taurus Scorpio axis is, you know, what are we investing in?
Mhm.
Recognizing anytime we're giving attention to things, we are making an investment.
Mhm.
And so we can be real clear about that and get real clear about that. And as the nodes move into Aries and Libra, we're going to be experiencing this opportunity to get really precise around what we're actually taking action on and what it is we're really attracted to and what it is that we are not, what it is that we're repulsed by or where we're experiencing you know, things that, may seem like um, it's causing a lot of irritation in our lives, but that irritation may be just a signal that that thing, whatever it is actually trying to get out of
Mhm.
your field
Mhm.
so that what is resonant for you can get into your field, can come and magnetize to you because it's actually more authentic and true to your identity and your
Mhm.
natural self.
Mhm. Yeah. It's interesting to ponder again the energy of anger, and how ultimately, and of course that comes with some inner work, understanding that the anger, of course, can be projected. It's a natural connection between Aries and Libra. And once we withdraw the projection, we have this energy available, as you said, and we can apply it to perfecting our reality and perfecting our own engagement with the reality, in a sense that we can express ourselves more truly. And it's interesting how, again, the nodes will be in just a few months in Aries and Libra, and then we have this whole process almost initiated right now. How are my actions according to my own values, and how is this expressed in my interactions with others? Is it expressed or is not expressed? Is it met or it's not met? Do I need to do adjustments or I don't need to do adjustments? It's interesting, especially with the nodes now coming to the very end of Taurus. It's almost like we had those 18 months in which we could figure out again what exactly belongs to me and what it doesn't. What is my value? What is it based on? So it's a beautiful progression, and it's actually a beautiful start of that change, almost, with that new moon.
Yeah. I mean, it's neat too, because as we know, Pluto will retrograde back into Capricorn.
Mhm.
And so there is a really significant uh, shift in reality coming, particularly outside reality, outside structures, because Aquarius is a yang consciousness, right? Where Pluto through Capricorn's been really working more internally. Now, it doesn't mean it hasn't been coming from out there and through relationships and relating, um, by its natural square to Aries and Libra. But with Pluto moving into Aquarius, this is, you know, this has been profound for me, because I've been really, really recognizing that, we thought that things were changing in the outside world when Pluto was in Capricorn. That's barely, because when Pluto goes through Aquarius, that's where things are really going to shift.
Mhm.
And we know that when Pluto enters a sign, it's a significant shift. And
Mhm.
so I think that the outer world is definitely very much changing. I think we're both probably very aware of that. I mean, we know when you're talking about Aquarius, there's all kinds of stirrings around, online communities, as well as the internet and technology, and the structures of society and how that will change because of it. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, but yeah, I know for myself, I think, well, when we talk about individually, I mean, no doubt, our identities are changing because of that, because there's really big changes on the horizon in the outer world and the way that society is structured.
Mhm.
Because Saturn and Uranus are both rulers of Aquarius. And so this means that how the structures of reality out there, it's going to be different. And Uranus being the ruler, I mean, it's always innovative, right? It is about integration. Actually, Uranus is really about integration. And when we actually don't have the consciousness or the capacity to integrate, this is where we go into fragmentation and into disassociation
Mhm.
and mental trauma or trauma.
Mhm.
And so, it's interesting because with this Pluto and Aquarius, it's going to be exposing where it is that we maybe didn't feel able to actually, or maybe had traumatic experiences where we were not able to be our unique, brilliant selves. We're naturally all brilliant.
Mhm.
It's just our very nature, because everything that exists is of source energy, so therefore is naturally brilliant. However, if we haven't been able to be our authentic selves or tap into our authentic self or our natural self,
Mhm.
then our personal brilliance cannot come online. But
Exactly.
our personal brilliance is natural.
Mhm.
And so Pluto going through there too is also going to be exposing that. And yet, on top of having to integrate into a new identity based on the way that, society is changing
Mhm.
and the way that we're going to have to be able to integrate a lot more information,
Mhm.
because Aquarius is an air sign. And, we already know just AI and all of this, you know, technology, we're having to integrate and learn in new ways. And it's a lot to keep up with.
Mhm. And by itself, it can present a huge opportunity for more fragmentation, because there is no that's very important, because even if we look at the natural zodiac, we know that the 11th house has to do with Aquarius and Uranus, and then after the 11th house, we have the 12th house of the collective, and then Aries comes. So it's interesting what happens if we, instead of expressing our individuality in Aquarian sense and in 11th house sense, and through that individuality, pure, unique, we can connect to like-minded people, or we can be in societies where every individuality is nurtured and not stifled. Then when we go to the collective unconscious, of course, we all have to die just the way it is, the process in 3D reality, we bring that individuated consciousness as a gift to the whole collective. The whole collective can dip into it and actually feed. We talk about the fact that every new kid that is born, there is an acceleration process. So they come naturally knowing more than their parents. Whether this is going to be nurtured so that it can express itself, it's a totally different question, topic. But the thing is that they naturally have as a potential way more than their parents. And that's normal because they're just now coming in. So they're feeding off of what's been brought during the time they're born and we were born. But what happens if our individuality is not expressed, and it's usually not expressed because of some traumatic experiences, which we know that the traumatic experiences are fragmenting our totality. So the fragmentation, when we go to the collective from a fragmented state, we cannot bring this to the collective. We actually cannot even reach the source when we're fragmented. So there's the potential of coming back in an Aryan way, already traumatized. And so that's going to affect the way we're acting. That's going to create a situation where we don't act, we suppress our urges, or we're freezing, or we're, flying away, and that contributes again because an action like this is actually already suppressed, and we don't act on our behalf, so that the individuality cannot be expressed, cannot be developed, and naturally that creates cycles of lack of ability to express and all that. And so we can also see that through that 29 degree of Aries, it's a time to do it. It's that last degree where the pressure is so huge that again, I mean, we can find ourselves acting out and just being very much in awe of what we did, because that's usually not our way of acting, but it turns out to be the right way. And so we can also look at the Mars in our own charts and see where exactly we are able to or unable to express this individuality. And as you said, every time we don't do it, we act in a way that depletes our energy, or by projection, we will actually feel like the environment is depleting our energy.
Mhm.
So if I have Mars in the 7th house, I may think that I shouldn't be in relationships because those relationships are depleting my energy. Well, they're not necessarily depleting my energies. Bad relationships are depleting my energy. But the question is, why am I attracting those bad relationships? Well, if I'm expressing myself and what I want, I'm not going to be, obviously, if somebody is not willing to give that, you're not going to be in a relationship with somebody like this. Question is why you're in a relationship compromising yourself. Well, that's a relationship that depletes your energy. Well, apply that principle into, you know, Mars in 11th house, Mars in 2nd house, Mars in 5th house, Mars in 4th house. And that's the realization of, you know, if during this talk people are like, well, I'm not quite sure where exactly I'm not expressing myself. Well, this is a cue for you to figure out if there is anything that can be worked on in that area of life where this new moon can actually reach its potential by people enacting their own desires and seeing actually it's inevitable when this question comes to the fore, and then all these energies are so strong that we cannot necessarily suppress that action anymore, to review also the idea of the fear. Because every time we're not acting on our desires or not acting from the core of who we are, well, what is the reason for that? The reason is fear first. And so that's another another avenue for exploration over the next several months of where is that fear coming and how we can deal with fear.
Yeah, I mean, and the fear really just shows where it is that we've unconsciously uh we've created almost like, I always think of Pluto as the default settings,
Mhm,
right? So when we act in a specific way, it becomes automatic pilot. It becomes our default setting.
mhm,
And so when we actually have a fear, it's um it's actually where we've I feel like we've acted in ways that are not in alignment with who we really are,
mhm,
because who we are is empowered.
mhm,
And so I think that, that fear can come up around those things as well. And I keep wanting to say this, and I keep forgetting, is that Mars is in Cancer, sextile Uranus
mhm,
and Mercury.
mhm,
And it's interesting to me how Mars is in Cancer, um because one of the things that you've said that I think is really important is that I didn't think of, and it's just an interesting, I don't know, it just feels very poignant for me. Every time you've said it, is just that we might find ourselves acting, and that's that Mars in Cancer, and in ways where then you're kind of like, well, where did that come from? You know, and that really describes the Mars sextile Mercury and Uranus there.
mhm,
And like you've said, it could be this, where you're like, well, that's actually who I really am.
mhm,
And it was this instinctual and in some ways very different. than what I've done before, but actually this is good. That's a good thing. I mean, that Mars in Cancer was quincunx. I mean, it's coming out of that, right? Quincunx.
Mhm.
Is that right? Wait, am I thinking that right?
To to
No,
what?
it was trine. No, I'm thinking Venus. Sorry.
Oh,
So Mars and Pluto. Ah, that's so interesting because Mars, when Mars goes into Leo, it's going to oppose that Pluto. I think that's in May. I
mhm,
think that happens in May, which is really interesting.
mhm,
And we also want to be sure to also recognize that Pluto is square the nodes right now.
mhm,
So that's also bringing the pressure around, um, and where I think we could just naturally act on our own behalf in ways that we weren't really we weren't really maybe expecting, or
mhm,
it's unpredictable in some way.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and that's, as you said, it's interesting when this Mars goes into this full opposition to Pluto, because Mars will be in Leo. And so we have this again, the previous cross activated, which is the mirror, the fixed cross of Pluto. And that's, again, we're not going off the subject. It's very related to this new moon, because we will have this natural instinct to go and really do the figure it, have the power and to for a full expression. But then we also, because again, the whole cross acts as one entity. And so we do have the Pluto in Aquarius, where we're reminded of the fragmentation, of the trauma. How is this related into enacting into certain situations where I lack power? I have to depend on other people in a scorpionic way. And I have to not recognize my own creativity, Leo, because I'm either dependent on money or dependent on for a relationship. I'm dependent for security reasons of all sorts, based on other people, based on other entities, Scorpio, as opposed to embracing what exactly is the natural and coming from me, Taurus. And so I think probably by the time Mars goes to Leo, I don't remember the notes, maybe already um, in the Aries Libra, but it's going to be still a very close square. So that's also the idea of, again, where do I feel disconnected from my own power? Where do I feel, and what is the reason? How do I gather those pieces together? And in this particular case, we do have the Venus in Gemini, almost trying to assist or help with all this this process, because naturally, if we have a reaction like this, where okay, I'm acting, and all of a sudden that action has nothing to do with who I think I am, but actually turns out to be a good one, then how come I disconnected from that part of me? What was the reason for that disconnection? And so the exploration starts. And by the nodes shifting into South Node into Libra, and then the North nodes into Aries, we have the opportunity, of course, to review the past. Well, we all know and we can see where the South Node of Libra falls into our own chart. So we can see where the disconnects started, where exactly we decided that, not decided, but we were made to believe that we should acquiesce our own identity and then bring it back to the fourth by whatever the North Node falls into our chart by transit. And so there is nothing bad that's going to happen from that exploration, just the opposite. We're actually by embracing this process, by focusing our attention/energy into bringing this pure and authentic individuality more and more in terms of the North Node. I mean, starting right now with the new moon in Aries, North Node moving into Aries, and then Mars into Leo. The more we do that, the more we're actually calibrating our own reality, because we're improving our energy, and that energy attracts something that resonates to it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because, yeah, that time is going to correspond to those 6 months or whatever it is that is known that the eclipses are in their own action in terms of energies that are happening within us. They're not causing us to act in a certain way. There is a synchronistic interplay between those energies and the energies that are steering within us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I am thinking that we should take a moment to, I need to actually get my computer charger, and we could just take a 5-minute break. My cat wants to go outside and things like that, so I'm going to take care of that,
Okay,
and then we can pick up where we left off.
sure.
So I'm going to stop the screen sharing, and then just I wonder if let me see here. I'm going to pause the recording, okay? And so we can come back in by like 6:30.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, great. I'll see you then.
All right.
Okay, so we are back. And I'm going to pull up the chart again. And so as we were coming on to resume the recording, we were talking about how when we emerge out of the womb into this Aries, the I am, the personal identity, that we just naturally, immediately, instinctually act on our own behalf. And that comes in infancy, right? We cry when we need to cry. When we need something or desire something, we do whatever it is we know to do as a baby. First and foremost, is, you know, we've come out of the womb and we're an infant. We cry when we need food, or we learn how it is to get our needs met. And that's what Mars is really about. It's about getting our needs met. First and foremost, to survive, right? This is a natural instinct for all beings. And that's what Aries and Mars can be. But in that psychological development, we know that we have authority figures, which can be that natural square, Cancer and Capricorn, where we have this authority figures or caregivers, Cancer, Capricorn, that are assisting us to getting our needs met. So we have parents or primary caregivers naturally, and as really typically, I would say all beings do. In the beginning, there is someone, and this is how we've survived from infancy to now, right? And that in that upbringing, depending upon how our primary caregivers and authority figures in that natural square to Cancer and Capricorn, how they were able to also provide for us that sense of safety and being secure. And, you know, first and foremost, our security is naturally going to be coming from this instinct to survive, which is Mars. It can also be Venus and Taurus, right? Because Taurus is the first earth sign. And it does have to do with the body, taking care of the needs of the body. But as we're a child emerging from the womb, Aries, it's going to be our natural instinct to get our needs met, to go towards that which is going to meet our needs. And we can do this again, as I said, by crying, for example, some kind of expression. And depending on how our primary caregivers were able to create that safety in that natural expression of getting our needs met, this is where we can actually recognize how it is that we have actually either been able to maintain that natural inclination to act on our own behalf to get our needs met, or we may have began a certain level of conditioning. And I think no matter what, we did get a certain level of conditioning, which is a Saturn keyword as well as a Capricorn keyword, this conditioning around our instincts. And so, and can be our value based on that natural square from Capricorn to Libra, where our relationships to our primary caregivers, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn, how that reflected to us our identity. And so we can have developed this conditioning around our own emotional security in regards to acting on our own behalf. And if there was any kind of a reflection from our caregivers, our primary caregivers, our parents, our family, around our own needs and how we acted upon them, that could have been actually encouraging our natural identity, or it was actually diminishing our natural identity. And this is where then this fear can have been cultivated rather than power and personal power. Because remember, personal power and power itself is truly personal power that is derived from our own identity, and we all have it. But how well that actually got played out in the psychological development from Aries to Scorpio, and I say Scorpio because it is ruled by Mars and Pluto, how that develops through the natural progression of the psychological development. This is where we can either experience personal empowerment in acting on our own behalf and our own needs, and maintaining the authenticity of our own identity in that process, or when we experience fear, or we haven't acted upon our own natural self or our own natural needs and our identity, we can experience fear in doing so. And so with this Pluto square the new moon and sun, the new moon solar eclipse in Aries, right?
Mm-hmm.
This can be really giving the nudge to really look at, that fear, and doing what we can to begin to cultivate emotional security within, regardless. And the saying goes like, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as we were prepping to come back on, Kamelia was talking about like the importance of actually really looking at that and actually then finding ways to actually work with that and begin to create evolutionary momentum beyond any conditioning that's happened from potentially acting on behalf of who we are in our natural self and what's actually resonant for our natural self.
Yes, and we were actually talking about, just reflecting on our normal, our own processes, because we're not immune by fear. Of course, we're human beings, and it's part of our own exploration as well. So, how do we deal with fear? And especially if it's a fear that's been induced or it's been conditioned at a very early age where we're not even able to reflect on that. So that's when our instinctual reactions are even more exaggerated, because there is no forethought. So we do something instinctually because it signifies it's a red light. It's a red light for us to. If we don't do it, then there's going to be something bad. And if we are talking about this natural conditioning from the not natural, but the conditioning from early age, what happens if we don't behave the way we're expected to behave? We are disconnected from the community, from the person that supports our life. So naturally, every time when we feel fear, we have to understand that that fear is from, again, losing that life, or not feeling nurtured, or losing the community that we're in. And so how can we, that's a very, 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 very strong fear. And so
Yeah, because it has to do with because our primary and primal instinct is to survive. We correlate it because something that you said is really important, is that we have not psychologically developed enough to even understand or comprehend how those experiences in early life can be programmed into the brain synapses, and in a way in which we're actually equating, because remembering that first and foremost, we need to survive. And that is the instinct, is to survive. Then we can start thriving. And so our first instinct is to take the 2 steps towards our needs, 1 step back, like, oh, well, wait, maybe I need to do it in a different way in order to survive. In order, as you said, and this is very key too, because Pluto's in Aquarius, to continue to be accepted within the group, because my survival is dependent upon that. As a baby, survival is dependent upon that. It's perceived as that. And that, even though, and interestingly, we will continue that program and that default setting, that automatic pilot, throughout our lives into adulthood, until we become aware that we've actually attracted things that we do not desire in our life. And so then we have to adjust and actually change these default settings. And one of the things about that is super important is, as Pluto is in Aquarius, it's going to expose where we actually, out of our desire, this instinct that likely was conditioned through being an infant and part of a tribe. Our first tribe is our family or group that our survival depends upon. But then in adulthood, often we can actually be finding ourselves within groups that are really not resonant for us, but we perceive that as survival, even though to the conscious mind, that doesn't make sense. But it also is then reflected at, well, I'm part of this group, and yet I cannot be who I really am within the group. And if, this is where this Pluto in Aquarius is going to be super awesome in assisting us to look at, where is it that I cannot be my natural self? What groups, what friendships, what relationships, where is it that I'm relating in ways that actually may be coming from a primal instinct to survive, but the brain doesn't know that it isn't about survival anymore. So this is where we can, or, our ego can be like, oh, that doesn't make sense. I know that I could not be part of this group and I'm going to survive. but do we really know that?
Yeah, especially if the group is a family, we all thought that we can't, oppose our family or the friends that we've been for such a long time. How are you going to stay without those friends? Well, very easy. And it's interesting. So the way also Saturn, we were talking about the fact that Saturn was with in a trine for a while there with Mars. So here's the opportunity to see how those structures that we have built, the field of our friends, the associations that we belong to, the all the systems can actually start to dissolve, and we can feel that dissolution, and how this actually is going to affect our actions, our undertakings right now to proceed with, again, acting out on behalf of our core Cancer, our deepest core. When we talk about Cancer, we talk about the fourth house and the family. But there is a Cancer as an archetype has this idea. Before we talk about family, we talk about family and home, because naturally we were expected to be able to express ourselves fully into the family setting, right? Where our identity is ultimately accepted and nurtured. However, this many people will testify that's not the case, or at least very minimal percentage nowadays is the case. So what happens is that before Cancer signifies the family and the home, it actually has to do with our deeper core, sensitive core, our emotional security. Well, yeah, it's supposed to come from the family, not necessarily though in our setting. So we have the opportunity through dissolution of those identified structures that we supposedly belong in, or we have to follow the rules because that's how we've been conditioned, to actually take action on expressing what is it that the core desires, where I can feel secure to be myself, and to actually open up. And so the way this could be done is, that's something that we were discussing, is to follow the process of my own unfoldment. And where would the fear come in this case is, of course, the ultimate fear of feeling judged or not accepted or not liked. And so it's the process of, again, how do we value ourselves? How do we go step by step, and actually act on what's coming up next? What is the fear of not being accepted, the fear of making a mistake? Then thinking about who doesn't make mistakes. What is more important, to be like somebody, or to, and the society is not short of imposing on us all kinds of different stereotypes of what you're supposed to be. If you're doing this, who are you supposed to look like? If you're doing this, how this is supposed to be done? But then ultimately, that's just a structure that actually dissolves.
It's actually, all of those things are definitions that others have potentially placed, because, one of the things that I think is interesting, what you're talking about, what was going through my mind was like having somebody, like, say you're a painter, and, they say, oh, no, you're not supposed to like paint like this.
Mhm.
Or let's just say, in order to paint a human, it needs to be done this way.
Right.
But there's as many ways to do it as there are people.
Yes.
And so, someone that's developed their personal self-value would then recognize through from Venus and Taurus to Gemini is that, oh, okay, well that's one way. And then there's my way,
Mhm.
where it's like what seems to be opposite, but in some ways they support each other. Gemini is very much about connection and recognizing that it's this and that, right?
Mhm.
It goes out and it's a part of our consciousness that defines things.
Mhm.
But if we're doing that Geminian consciousness in a way that's personally supportive, as well as supportive to the outside world, we recognize that we all, that Gemini, through it being this and that rather than this or that, that's why Gemini is such a creative
Mhm. Mhm.
energy,
Mhm.
because it's about having many, many different languages, many, many different ways of communicating ideas.
Mhm.
And so when we maintain our personal value, then, as a painter, for example, someone might say, oh, no, you're supposed to do it that way. But you're going to continue to really value yourself and your own personal way of defining things for yourself so that you can communicate through your own personal language of the way in which express yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's that's really I find to be an important piece. And I think that there are many things that we've experienced in societies, pretty much no matter where in the world you live in this era, where we've had conditionings and structures that say that there's something outside of you that is to direct you toward uh, your own identity,
Mhm.
or to your own personal expression
Mhm.
and the way in which you should structure things, right?
Mhm.
But what's so cool about that Pluto in Aquarius is that it's actually about exposing those things, those structures that are actually not actually adding to your personal brilliance, your personal self-actualization process, Leo.
Mhm. Yeah, and the way to so the reason we're touching on that is because the way to deal with fear is actually to follow your own process, to follow your own instinct. And of course, we're all conditioned with the fact in one way or another, or it is different degrees of suppressing those instincts, because there's always going to be somebody out there that's going to say, well, that's not good enough, or it's you have to do it in a different way and all that. Yet, if we build our identity based on those requirements, then how solid in a Taurian way would that identity be? And if we build that fake identity, and then how from that identity we express that identity in others, again, the Taurian part, the Venusian part, the Venus that is ruling Taurus and also Taurus and also Libra, then we're going to end up in relationships where there is no, we're not the real self. And so, and I'm going to bring the example of Salvador Dali here, and we have spoken about his chart with Alisé before. As people know, he's prominent surrealistic painter, but he never graduated from fine arts college. He barely was able to go through his normal school. And the main thing for him was that nobody will tell me how to paint. Nobody can tell me, because my ideas are so strong and I can actually want to implement them in the way they come to me. So we all know how famous he is, and not to promote the famousness, but this is a person, and I'm sure there is others as well. There's plenty out there that have followed their own process
Mhm.
on the midst of the odds out there in the world. And we can think of very famous actors and singers, and none of them actually have graduated from college that they were taught how to act or how to sing. So the most prominent people out there that strike us with amazing identity and uniqueness are the ones that have followed their own process, their own instincts. And this is what this Mars in Cancer is actually doing and it's calling for. And it's not that it needs to be in Cancer in order to call us. We are already feeling that there is something unique within us, and that is core, very core to us, that has its own way. It's asking for its own way. It's like the baby that wants to be nurtured or wants to be fed in that particular moment. You can impose a structure on feeding the baby or something like this, but that's going to only cause trauma to that baby. So there is this natural thing that is coming from within us. And the more we start paying attention to it, the more difficult it will be to disregard that. And the more we start embracing it, the more we will see how that brings our energy back and withdraws it from the other people that it's been projected onto. Because every time we don't know the energy, then depending on where the Mars is in our chart, not because of that, but there is a correlation, that's where we feel depleted. So for example, we can, let's say we want to be a psychologist. So we get into the school that supposedly they're going to teach us to be a psychologist. And we end up studying all kinds of things that are not natural. And then somebody tells us that in order for us to be a psychiatrist, you have to be a doctor in psychology. Then you have to continue to study, I don't know how many years, you have to pick up a theme, and then you have to kind of work on that theme, which has nothing to do with working with people, nothing to do with working on your own issues. Then you graduate, there is a certain theme that supports you, you defend your thesis, and then you're a PhD in psychology. And then you go and then you lecture in schools. But then eventually, there's going to be this part of you that's going to be calling you. That is that it? Is that really it? Are you a psychologist? That may eventually, I mean, I'm not saying that that's not necessarily 100% of the time, but that could eventually, you get Uranus opposition Uranus, and then the idea of, is that my identity, is gonna jump right there. Mm-hmm. So what constitutes a psychologist? Is it the degree necessarily? Or is it the fact that you've graduated in certain therapeutic school and now you're a psychologist? Can you be a psychologist based on that? No, psychologist is you work on yourself, then you look at the archetypes, and then you constantly develop this sense of reflection. You constantly build your knowledge based on practice. You cannot build it based on reading books. That's the thing.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and when you look at in society, there is so much that is placing authority outside of ourselves to actually cultivate the identity that we've naturally come here to be, that is beyond and super unique, and so beyond what anything could be taught out there. And so you have all of these universities and school systems and degrees that really do not fit the unique individual that each person is. It's actually trying to teach from a way and from a structure that actually constricts rather than expands consciousness. Mm-hmm. And it constricts identity rather than expands natural personal identity. And so, you know, I mean, what's beautiful about Pluto moving through Aquarius is that it's very possible that people will catch on to this. I mean, you can already see it. You can see people doing this now, mm-hmm. Where they're, and there's going to be positives and negatives, or I don't know if I even like to say positive or negative, but I think that there can be with Pluto in Aquarius, it is, as the saying goes, let your freak flag fly. And I think that people are becoming more willing to actually do what it is that they love and claim what kind of work they desire to do, regardless of having a degree in something or not, but actually even choosing their own curriculum. And I was actually in our conversation thinking about Evergreen College, which is here in Washington State, where I live. And at Evergreen College, you basically create your own curriculum, your own pathway to learning the degree to which you want to be practicing.
Right.
And so you create your own curriculum. You don't have somebody structuring it for you. And I've never been to that college, so I can't say that I know the ins and outs of it. But I think that that's an interesting forward-thinking model, because really we learn by doing.
Right.
And like you said, it's something that you can't really, anything in life, you cannot learn from just reading. I mean, you can enhance ideas, but as far as like developing wisdom, it has to be done with practice. So I think that a lot of personal self-actualization for people has been really under the control of systems that are not really allowing for freedom to create. And yet it is our very nature, it is part of our natural self to be creators.
Right.
This is shown in the fixed Grand Cross with Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, and Scorpio. Every single one of us is designed to be a unique creator, an expression of the creator.
Yeah. Yes, and it's interesting. This heralding new moon is really how important, and of course everything in the universe has a very beautiful harmony. But considering where we're coming from and all these structures that have conditioned us in many different ways not to express that natural creative force, and in that way disconnecting us from the natural sources natural currents that we're connected to source, that's considering that Pluto is going to be moving through Aquarius, and that's going to be for a good 20 years or so. We know that the lack of or the suppression of the expression of our natural nature leads to fragmentation. So what all these transits are preparing us, and also the nodes that are going to be moving into Libra and Aries, naturally following that new moon, is literally calling for embracement, releasing the fear, embracement of that individuality. Why? Because we cannot sustain ourselves through that process when Pluto is moving through Aquarius if we don't have a strong identity. So just the opposite, what's going to happen is there's going to be more fragmentation and more fragmentation of our own identity. And so it's calling for reviewing our allegiances, why we're associating with a group, why we're associating with friends, why we're in certain settings. Is it because we feel empowered, or because we need to belong or sustain some sort of fake identity? And what principles are those groups built on? Are they built because they want to survive? Are they built because they want to sustain certain form of control or anything like that? Or they're actually allowing naturally the expression of every individual within them? And we can actually think about, again, our own affiliations, whether it's within a family or partners or friends or job or any place. Are we there, and do we feel suppressed, or we don't feel suppressed? And if we do feel suppressed, again, what is the fear and why we're staying there? because the more we stay there, the more we deplete our energy, the more we fragment, and the more we disappear literally as an identity. So that's a really good preparation of working on that identification and also working with that fear, because in an Aquarian way, we can build the reality that is actually supporting of that identity, but we cannot build it if we don't know where is the identity or we don't know who we are. And so, interestingly enough, with that dissolution of structures as we know them, we know that the governments are corrupted. We know that the church doesn't really connect us to anything, but builds a lot of sense of guilt and a lot of sense of dissatisfaction and a lot of fake sense of community, because we have to maintain certain equality there. As those structures are actually falling down, we have a little bit more freedom to find their space, to find their identity without them. And I think that that's one of the calls here. And the thing is, what's calling you will keep calling you. That's it. You can't run away. The only way you can run away is in the sense of in the state of depression, which also correlates to the cardinal archetype, Capricorn, Cancer.
Well, and two, depression is a function of consciousness to go within, because ultimately that is where everything really is found. And so we have to go within in order to figure out what is it, how is it that we want to build our reality out there, so that we are our authentic selves. And our natural and authentic self is really excited and ecstatic to be creating life in the way that we would actually would be regenerating energy for us. So, you know, if depression does come, that's a natural call to really self-reflect. And one of the things that came to mind when you're talking too is just that fragmentation of consciousness is actually what is also correlated to what they call soul loss. Now, you know, soul loss is, I don't believe we could ever really lose our soul, but it is about losing touch with our soul.
Yes, exactly.
And that is what fragmentation of consciousness does. And when you think about that, it also then, of course, that means we're losing touch with our own personal power and our own capacity to regenerate consciousness, regenerate our body even. You know, our body is going to naturally reflect our vitality. And when we are acting on our own behalf and creating, we will look very vital. We will actually be regenerating energy within the body. We also age less because of that.
Exactly.
Because we're in alignment with our natural self. And that's easy. It's an ease, just like you brought up, Kamelia, in regards to like, it's a natural flow of energy to be who you are. And so it naturally revitalizes itself. But to resist who we really are takes energy from us. It depletes energy, and we have less energy in our lives, less energy for even cell turnover, right? So it is so naturally ingrained for us to be become in alignment with who we naturally are. And this is super important with the Mars, with the Pluto being square to this new moon in Aries, because especially because this is the beginning of Pluto's transit through Aquarius. And there is I think that Pluto square is giving that importance. Like, it's time to be in your identity. Like, if you're not get with it, because otherwise, uh, there's a potential for more re-traumatization
Exactly. Yeah.
and more fragmentation of your own consciousness, of basically mental instability in society as well. I mean, we can't ignore that there's been a lot of mental instability in society. I mean, it's exposing what that there is something going on mentally that isn't healthy. The way in which we've structured society isn't supporting individuals, not just, you know, here or there, it's many,
Mm-hmm.
where there's mental instability is becoming, and disassociation and fragmentation is becoming almost normalized. And another piece that was coming to mind too is just that of how um, there is, and this might be controversial to bring up, but it's something, it's food for thought. And, you know, we're all going to have our own process in really looking at this new, some of the new elements that are coming into our awareness now. But all of the changing of the body and to appear a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
um, or also AI, and you know, where even technology that's exposing how, like, it can actually literally read your voice and then be used to create and make it seem like you said things that you didn't say,
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't really coming from you, and it's not detectable whether
Mm-hmm.
it was coming from you or not. So what I've been hearing people talk about is like, we're really getting into this place where we're actually potentially making it a challenge to even know what's real anymore, not only in, you know, someone's appearance,
Right.
but also in, you know, maybe even video and voice recordings of people, um, through the technology, and then, you know, AI, and as well as, you know, these I know this was a bit of a controversy with the AI profile pictures on Facebook and all of that. And, you know, so we're getting to the place where, you know, the question will be, are we moving really towards our natural identity, or are we moving away from it?
Yes, exactly.
Are
Yeah.
we fragmenting our consciousness, or becoming more whole, more integrated in who we naturally are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and exactly what constitutes human consciousness as opposed to AI, let's say. What is it? What is the difference? Where is this core that is making us different than AI? With changing of the face, I mean, there is one. I mean, not only the face, but you know, everybody trying to be this ideal. We're actually making ourselves equal. That's what happens in the name of imposed standard for beauty. But you become equal as everyone else. So that's it. There is no individuality there.
Right. So that's where that uniqueness of
Yeah.
your own individuality, is that being lost,
Yes.
even though the instinct, I think, towards that is to express your individuality. It's actually then kind of a bit of a paradox in a way. um
Yes. I mean, all the standards out there in society, especially in fashion, are based on, I mean, what is it? The first thing that you get to know is that you're not good enough, or you're not beautiful enough, or you're not so enough for whom?
exactly. For
That
who?
question, right? For whom? for something that is not real. That's the thing. So let's say the summer comes and we've seen this all the time. The green is the new color. Well, first of all, green is never a new color. It's been there forever, and every piece of grass has a green color. So how is the green new color? But there is a conveying of certain way of thinking, certain programming. So everybody starts wearing green all of a sudden. But the core is everybody starts wearing green. How are you becoming different? How are you yourself? You're putting that green dress, not because you like green, but because somebody tells you that that's the new color. For whom is the new color?
Mhm.
So that's something that we can start unraveling in terms of programming. And I think that's also part of Pluto in Aquarius.
Yes. Well, and two, where is it then when we have those things? How is that showing our actually instinct to shut down creativity
Mhm.
rather than expand creativity? Or, in
Yeah.
other words, constrict creativity rather than expand creativity? Because when you have these, let's say, fads, or these, like, this is the new thing, or, and then everyone's doing it, it then no longer becomes this individual expression. It could be, on a certain level, a way of tools to surprisingly manipulate,
Mhm.
because it's an unconscious manipulation to utilize these things to be accepted.
Exactly.
Who wants to be in relationship with someone? And I'm just using this as an example, and we can use it the way that any individual would personally, but it's like, who wants to really be in relationship with someone because, like, that person is trying to accommodate what we like?
Mhm.
That's not naturally them, so you're not really having a relationship with them.
Exactly. That's a very, very important point, because that's how, in the process of gaining some sort of acknowledgement, we actually lose ourselves, and we are not going to gain the acknowledgement, because there's no, the more we start to accommodate other people or institutions or anything, that opens our field. And actually the institution or the other people or whatever it is going to continue to ask for more and more and more. So there's going to be a depletion of energy right there. So paradoxically enough, the more we try to gain this safety by well, actually it's not paradoxical, by compromising ourselves and sustain life, because that's what we equalize safety with. That's what we have translated safety in. The more we actually kill life within us, because the life is equal to the amount of energy that we have, and that energy comes from acting out on what we are. We're basically a conduit from the source energy to express itself in the most unique way through us.
Mhm.
So safety comes from there.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's how we feel accepted, because our expression is nurtured. So one pointer to understand that we're not accepted is whether or not the situation we found ourselves in, or the people we found ourselves among, are able to nurture our uniqueness, and how much we find ourselves changing ourselves in order to stay in that environment.
Mhm.
That's almost like a homework until the next release
Mhm.
for people to ponder on.
Yeah, there's something that's coming to my mind about going back to what you're saying about really feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Like, in other words, to act on our own behalves, regardless of feeling fear. I wanted to say that I really think that the fear that we experience is actually the immensity of our power.
That's a great way to put it, actually. Yeah, that's a great thought.
Because when we're not used to our power,
Mhm.
or we're not accustomed to feeling that power, it can be translated as fear.
Mhm.
And I also wanted to say that I also feel that anxiety can also be power that wants to be expressed.
Mhm.
And so we might feel anxiety when we are acting in new ways. Uh, we may feel fear about acting in new ways or that we acted in a new way.
Mhm.
But if we allow ourselves to really move through that process and really look at what ideas, thoughts come to mind,
Mhm.
we can really get to understand that those thoughts that come to mind, or feelings, that they're coming from definitions that may not be ours. And we get the opportunity to really look at this as an opportunity to recognize that, who says this? Whose idea is this? Is it mine? Is it really mine?
Mhm.
And we can allow any circumstance to actually expose itself to us by really keeping with trusting ourselves,
Right.
trusting in the ways in which we've acted on our own behalf, even if it's something that we decide, yeah, I don't want to do that again,
Mhm.
that still was genius, because we needed to experience that as actually giving us something valuable that will inform us in our next course of action.
Maybe that's not for us, and we're not going to go in that direction.
Yeah, even if it's that. But no matter what, it's going to also then, again, remember, it's going to bring in this, okay, well, what am I feeling right now?
Mhm.
Okay, why am I feeling that? Well, it produces, like, this is something that has produced a thought or a definition or a belief that is actually then creating a feeling,
Mhm.
because thoughts, perceptions, beliefs come before feeling. We can't feel anything without having an idea about it, or a thought about it, or some kind of a definition. And so that piece is really important in regards to, I think, in regards to acting on our own behalf in new ways, especially in this new moon solar eclipse, because that Mercury is in a balsamic or completing conjunction with Uranus.
Mhm.
And then remembering too that the anxiety, anxiety is related to Virgo. And remember that Virgo is the quincunx. It's the quincunx from Aries, right? And so if we have acting, say we're acting on our own creative self-actualization, which is Mars to Leo, right? The sun, Leo.
Mhm.
Then, as in psychological development, the sign after Leo is Virgo. And Virgo is discernment. It's where we actually apply discernment, where we can go, okay, you know, we've received information, and, you know, are there any adjustments? The quincunx is a adjustment, where we get the opportunity to really see, are there adjustments that we could make to refine the way in which we're acting on our own behalf and acting upon our own self-actualization process in a creative way, right? Whatever creative endeavor it is for us, in whatever way we are creating in any aspect of our life. And when we come to Virgo, if we experience anxiety in that refinement process, we can recognize too that I really think that this could be utilizing discernment and the way in which we're defining things. And also where we could even be experiencing anxiety because of our own around feeling our own power. And so we can use discernment and actually like recognize that this is just power that wants to move through Mars, really, you know, Mars, and refining that power to direct us in really in efficient ways, because Virgo likes to be it likes to be efficient. And we don't, you know, the shadow of Virgo can be self-doubt. But really, I think there's never really, we don't want to be really feeding self-doubt, because every action that we're taking, when we really are trusting our own self-actualization process, we trust ourselves to know that as we're acting on our own behalf, there may be areas where we decide to kind of, oh, well, you know, if we're going for this destination, well, we need to make an adjustment actually with the wheel, you know, and so we need to like go a little bit, turn this way a little bit, you know, there's an adjustment there. We don't need to feel, you know, self-doubt and beat ourselves up for that. It's just like, oh, I was going this direction. Oh, okay, you know, now it's time to go this direction. So yeah, you know, I feel like something you mentioned about like making mistakes, you know, and like you said, like everyone's made mistakes. But as an artist, you know, we know that sometimes, well, I don't know, I think I'm not a super experienced artist, but you know, you can have an idea for a creative endeavor, and then, you know, a mistake happens, but it actually, when you keep going with it and you actually incorporate the mistake,
yeah, exactly.
the piece becomes even more beautiful. The piece actually expands into something that you weren't planning for. That's actually, I found, it becomes something that is even more beautiful and unique. And, you know, it's almost like the art piece speaks back.
Right. So yeah, that's part of the idea of following your own process and not discarding it because of mistake, or because somebody tells you no, or because you know, we're talking about as long as nobody's causing hurt to life per se in the endeavors. But we can't, and the idea of Virgonian criticism and all that comes from the comparison to the ideal. And we've been fed thousands of years that there is an ideal out there, and that ideal actually gets to judge. And so we have this into our being, incorporated through the culture that we live in and through pretty much everyday life. But we also have the opportunity to, again, through the dissolving structures, to realize, to any question, to what extent that's true. And as you said, the Virgonian process is supposed to be not caught into a comparison and with the ideal and constant criticism coming from there, but with adjustment and to understanding that. And I probably will have I'm going to give an example with my own process. I do paint and I enjoy the process, but what I've been having issues with is while I'm painting, I have these thoughts every once in a while, well, actually most of the time coming. And the thought is, it's not beautiful. It's not good. It just, no, that's ruining it. It doesn't come up well. So those are very torturing thoughts during the entire process. And what I've noticed is that I will do that for 2-3 hours in the night, and then I'll go to sleep, and then I get up in the morning and I look at the painting, and it's actually not that bad at all. It's actually pretty good in comparison to what those torturing thoughts were all throughout the process. So it was mind-boggling to me. How is this happening, and where are those thoughts coming from? And why would I have thoughts that it's not beautiful while the painting is still in the process? Well, you don't expect the painting to be beautiful while it's in the process, because that's how it's built, step by step by step by step. And so I actually realized, and it came to me through the whole experience, that instead of allowing the thoughts of criticism to come while you're doing something that you're enjoying, and obviously because you're not necessarily professional, it's not going to be good necessarily at the beginning, to engage into other thoughts or reframe those thoughts into, it is so interesting for me to see how this is going to end up eventually, because I know, and I am absolutely fine with not being perfect right now, but I really am thrilled to see how this process is going to unfold. And of course, that made a huge change into me approaching painting. I used to not approach the painting for months because I wasn't happy with certain things. But if you're not approaching the painting is not going to complete itself. So approaching your what you want to do or what you want to be, and giving it certain amount of hours in a day, understanding that that's not the final product, but you're putting into this energy into the final product by allowing yourself to be engaged in the process and learn from the process, is really how you enhance your energy and how your wrinkles disappear even. Because we all know how, if we are busy with doing our job, let's say, or whatever we're not taking necessarily pleasure in doing, and then somehow we allow ourselves to spend an hour or 15 minutes or 3 hours into something that we really like, you can compare your face in the mirror before the process and after, and you will see that it's almost like there is this something that has lifted out, and you look different and you feel different. And then the thoughts come into, oh, what's the point? I don't make money out of it and all that. It's not relevant. The whole process, the whole universe is showing you that this is something important. This is something that replenishes your energy. And by engaging into it on a step-by-step Virgo process, or
Yes.
that's going to enhance. It's going to continue. It's going to bear fruit. And also it's going to contribute to your identity, because you are what you want to be. You are what you want to engage in.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like relearning how to bring this energy in through us. And there is nothing that we need to, it's a natural way. I mean, it's opening the conduit for, again, be more of who we are.
Well, this comes into, just like the left brain and right brain thinking. And so the the higher mind and allowing the higher mind. I mean, the thing is that being that we have an ego that has a specific function, and as we've talked about, you know, coming from the cosmic womb or the mother's womb, right? And having an identity. So we've separated ourselves from, it seems we've separated ourselves from source, but it's not even possible to be separated from source because everything is made of source anyway, right? So it's not even possible to be separated, but to come into awareness of a personal identity, a separate identity than others, right? I think that, and that's in order to direct consciousness into a specific creative consciousness or expression of consciousness, right? That, oh gosh, I hope I don't lose my thought. Hold on. Mm, Let me grasp it. I think I was going to talk about how we have, the way I see it anyway, is that the development of that, we have this conscious or linear brain, the left side of left side. What am I trying to say here? The left brain thinking, the linear side of thinking, this mercurial process, right? And it's linear. So it's a very step-by-step process. And then we have the higher mind, which is intuitive. It's the right brain thinking. And the higher mind or the right brain thinking is able to grasp, you know, the how we're going to get from point A to point B. So we could say the beginning of a painting to the end of the painting. And that could be any endeavor that we have, any goal that we have. The higher mind already knows it because it's the part of our higher selves that actually encompasses the totality of our consciousness, right? Whereas the left brain is more associated with the ego or the physical brain, right? So it's like it has to, in order to experience anything, has to be linear. There has to be this like consecutive increments of the process. And so it's really important for us to actually allow the process to unfold and allow that journey to be on that journey and allow their space for the higher mind to come out. So the thing about this left brain thinking or this Mercury part of our brain or left, I think I might be switching from my right brain thinking to left brain thinking, but in that linear and left brain thinking that, you know, we can begin to judge it.
Exactly, yes.
And it actually, the judgment halts. It actually closes up our connection to the intuitive part of the brain, the right brain thinking, the higher mind that's getting us to and through the process. And in, I believe, the fastest route to the result that we desire. So using the painting, it's like when we judge it, then we're actually only seeing it from one angle. It's one little perspective, one moment in the process. But when we keep with it, when we actually notice those, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There's that kind of finite and more linear brain
Mhm.
thinking, oh, this isn't beautiful, but it's just one small piece of the process, but also one small piece of a much bigger picture.
Mm.
And we don't know that how that's actually leading to the bigger picture.
Mhm.
And so it is about really allowing that higher brain. And like for you, what you're saying in your example is that, you'd have those thoughts and then you'd take time away from it and you'd come back to it. And then you're like, what was I thinking? This is beautiful. And so it was like, it's kind of like really, disengaging from the left brain thinking and allowing more of and allowing that space, and allowing the process regardless of those thoughts that kind of were more judgmental.
Mhm.
But, in keeping going with it, then you realize, oh, actually that process was contributing to the bigger picture
Mhm.
and to this result that I was getting and that I'm getting with the piece of art, right? So I think that we know in society that there's been a favoring of this very linear way of thinking and less emphasis on intuition and trusting the higher mind, trusting that intuitive process, because there's been a lot of judgment. And I think that this exposes the sub age of Virgo and the Piscean age that we've been conditioned for
Mhm.
thousands of years to judge our own process, to judge other people's process.
Right.
But that is actually looking from a very, very finite angle of things rather than a more holistic understanding of a process, because all of us are in a creative process
Mm.
in many aspects of our lives.
Mhm.
And so when we understand that it's a process of expanding consciousness. And so we can trust that, I remember coming across this uh, with a particular coach, and she was like talking about how, with some of her clients, she coaches business. Her clients are people who have their own businesses, entrepreneurs, and they're like, I launched this product or this thing and it failed. And she's like, great, now do it again, and her clients are like, what do you mean? Like it failed? And she's like, yeah, perfect, do it again and
Mhm.
again and again and again. And so it's kind of like you wouldn't think that that is actually would be the response, but actually it is the best course of action, because as you continue and trust your process, you know that everything that you have done, even if it appears to have failed, was part of the much bigger masterpiece.
Mhm.
And so it bring all the every part of the process is bringing value. Whatever action you can take is bringing value to the masterpiece that is going to happen. And the thing is if we judge it, we actually halt our capacity to tune into the bigger picture,
Mhm.
uh, because we're actually, and we can go bring this back to Venusian themes and our vibration. We're actually, uh, when we judge, we're actually becoming the vibration of judgment. So we cannot tune into anything other than judgment.
Mhm.
So we need to step away. This can be helpful to step away or to actually self reflect and go, okay, why am I thinking these thoughts? Are these actually really mine?
Right.
Is this really helpful? Is this really supporting what it is I'm desiring to do here? And maybe this is an opportunity to recognize I may be holding beliefs that are actually keeping me uh, from acting on behalf of my own power.
Mhm.
in my own process as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it's important, especially in, the call for action from the core of who you are, to also review exactly those judgment patterns, because in many ways, judgment can be a product of us constantly comparing ourselves to others and not being able to hold on to our own identity. And so but we have long ago um, not even attended to that. And then what we only see is others and how they're able to attend to their own identity. And we can only judge because we don't have the power to embrace our own. And then that becomes a repeating pattern that is easy to adhere to or to retreat to, because it's something that we know how to do. Or judgment could be really telling us that that's how we actually address ourselves, and that's not helpful also. So every time there is a judgment in our life, we understand that the judgment is a natural way to suppress our own expression. And so we don't, I mean, it's important to look at it and see, what is this giving us? It's giving us nothing. It's giving us energy that is directed to the wrong place. That
Mm.
continuing to judge actually doesn't actually enhances our own expression, because the energy is put in the wrong place.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. I think I don't know if we talked about it. I know we talked about it today, but it may not have been in the recording. Um, what are we giving our prana to?
Mhm,
Where our energy, our life force energy.
mhm.
I mean, there's a difference between discernment and judgment.
Right. Mhm.
Discernment doesn't, it doesn't,
It doesn't put value onto the other person. It's discernment as whether I want to do that or I don't want to do that. That's not part of me. That's not who I am. So I will defer. But judgment puts the value onto the person, and we have a tendency to characterize the person as opposed to the deed of the person.
what's,
Uh, yeah.
well, also what's coming to me is judgment is resistance to the natural self,
Mhm. Yeah.
the
Um,
process.
it actually holds their own energy absolutely stuck to the other person or the other entity or the other whatever we're judging.
Mhm.
And because, I mean, that person, that entity, that whatever can grow, can change. We're just judging that particular moment or whatever that is. But in our consciousness, that person or entity will stay that way. And we will always have that type of energy towards that place. And it's going to hold us there. And even if we talk from a perspective of reincarnation, whatever that interaction is, it needs to resolve. So there is no point of actually doing that. We can understand. I mean, there's how many people are actually using judgment in order to enhance themselves. This is the bad thing. I'm the good one. That it really doesn't. It really does. It ultimately doesn't present you as a good one, because there's always, you're nurturing and you're actually feeding that energy of judgment, because that way you're opening yourself to judgment. So ultimately we can only do what we really want to do, but not necessarily on the background of judging others.
This is interesting because this does bring in this very interesting relationship between Aries and Virgo.
Mhm.
because when you think about Mars, kind of starting out with Aries, and then once Mars, if Mars was going through each of the signs, right, from Aries to Virgo, this is about, okay, Mars would be like with Virgo, discerning, applying discernment, um, is kind of just through selecting specific things that is going to contribute, and then discarding things that are maybe not going to contribute, right? But judgment is like applying energy
Mhm.
into resisting
Mhm.
the natural self. I mean, because Virgo being an earth sign, and also it is about process.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then, once, if Virgo hasn't understood how to use discernment rather than judgment, once it gets to Libra, it starts projecting all that judgment out there onto others,
Yeah.
rather than actually recognizing, oh, okay, there's just something that I need to discern, what's actually going to be good for me and what's not going to be good for me, right? Or for the process, whatever it is, for the creative endeavor, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So, um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's interesting. I think that that could be an important piece. Also, just because in the next, as we know, Aries and Libras, the nodes are going to be moving there in July.
Yeah.
Um, and I wrote down, so we're going to have the nodes in Aries and Libra, July 18th, 2023, until January 12th of 2025. And then the nodes will move into Virgo and Pisces.
Right.
And so, you know, I think that this particular piece of the conversation could be helpful in navigating the next, 3 years or so,
Right.
understanding really about resonance and our own relationship to ourself in
Mhm.
our own personal process as well, and how we can use discernment in our relationships and in our own personal process, without the necessary to project judgment
Right.
into relationships that are not resonant, or people that are not resonant or whatever. um,
Mhm.
so yeah, and I also just wanted to mention that Saturn's going to be, being that it's in Pisces for 2.5 years, it will eventually conjunct Neptune.
Mhm.
And I mean, that really feels like there's, we're in a place where we're dissolving realities.
Mhm.
And a new reality is going to emerge. I mean, that's a very important conjunction.
Right. Yeah.
It's almost like, one dream is ending and a new dream is beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's powerful. I'm excited about that.
Mm.
I don't know when it happens. I think I've looked, and then, I look at so many dates I forget. So I think it's oh, okay. Ooh, it's actually not as far off as I thought.
There could be few conjunctions there, most likely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Balsamic conjunction is in January of 2026 at like 20, Saturn's at 28 degrees and Neptune's at 29 degrees. but it doesn't completely conjunct until February of 2026 at 0 degrees of Aries. 0 degrees of Aries.
Mm.
Talk about a new identity emerging.
Yeah, so exciting times. But what needs to be done needs to be done, so that the whole process is eased out. We just have to realize that there's so much conversion from our identities and what we have come here to do or to heal, and so much conformity that all these energies are there to actually push us in the right direction. And of course, there is always option not to embrace that path and not to escape into all kinds of alternative paths. That's also an option, but there is nothing more beautiful than, I mean, feeling congruent and full of life through expression. That's all. I mean, not all, but
Well, what's beautiful with Pluto and Aquarius is that there could be some really powerful creative self-actualizations that start happening.
yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good way to end, maybe.
I think so too.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Great.
for the amazing opportunity as always to have these conversations. They're so rich and so stimulating.
Yes. Thank you so much. It's always so much fun. So until next time, and happy new moon, solar eclipse in a few days. I don't even think I don't even know that I announced that it's, oh, maybe I did, but we'll just say it again. So that new moon solar eclipse is April 20th, 2023, 12:19 a.m. in Eastern Standard Time. So if you're in Pacific Standard Time, then that means it's on the 19th. And that would be at then 9:19 p.m., right? Yeah, 9:19 p.m. on the 19th.
Right.
Yeah. So also, a practice that can be helpful is to gain clarity, which this is good with with Mercury and that Besommic conjunction with Uranus, is writing down your initiations and seedings. So one way to work with it, but there's many. So thank you so much, Kamelia.
Thank you, Alisé.
And bye for now.
Bye. You stop recording, right? You stop recording, right? Did you stop recording?
No, I'm going to do it right now.
Oh my God.
It's okay. It's good.
Okay.